bridge to beyond. The number line stretches away forever, and yet somehow beyond it lies something else, an infinite number of numbers that are themselves infinite in size. Between the two, there is no smooth region of transition, no numbers that are more than finite but less than infinite. This has been the reality of mainstream mathematics since the turn of the 20th century, where George Cantor works George Cantor's work on set theory and transmitted numbers started to become widely accepted. But there are those who object to this now orthodox picture of mathematical reality. Infinite is a fiction, say some. There are limits to how large, in practice, finite numbers can be, argued others. Meanwhile, recent mathematical research has ventured into a no man's land that may exist between finite numbers and infinity, bringing into question the meaning of infinity and relationship between mathematics and the world in which we live. Infinity has always a touchy subject, but its very nature, we can imagine it. A brain that's finite in size can never form a meaningful mental image of the infinite, but that's hardly a good question for denying it could exist. Most of us can grasp what an object could look like in 4 or more dimensions, although a few claim to have trained themselves to do it. Yet, there's no question that theoreticians can quite happily deal with higher dimensional shapes and spaces. Mathematicians regularly analyze all kinds of things that we can't picture in our mind's eye. For that matter, physicists have made discoveries about the real world that are unimaginable. For instance, most of happens in the realm of quantum mechanics, but the limitations of our ability to visualize or to understand through common sense aren't good reasons to dismiss the possibility that something is real. When this comes to infinity, we can picture something stretching away indefinitely into the distance, whether it be outer space or the number line. We can also appreciate the idea of time just going on and on, either in a linear or cyclical way, and not abruptly stopping at some point. In fact, in many ways, when it comes to the physical universe or the number line, it's just as hard to imagine them reaching an end as it is to picture that what it would be like for them having no end. After all, if time were eventually to stop, what would come next? Existence seems to demand time, and if space ends at some boundary, what lies on the other side? If there were no such things as infinity in maths, what are the limits beyond which we can go? Aristotle's distinction between potential infinity and actual or complete infinity, and his denial of the existence of the latter, has had an enduring appeal. Cantor was mercilessly attacked, most notably by his old mentor Leopold Kronecker, for daring to bring actual infinity into mathematics. Kronecker said, "I don't know what predominates in Cantor's theory, philosophy or theology, but I am sure that there is no mathematics there." Well before Cantor appeared on the scene, Karl Gauss had made his position clear. Along with that of the most mathematicians at the time, infinity is nothing more than a feature of space which helps us talk about limits. The notion of complete infinity does not belong in mathematics.
Objections to the existence of infinity in maths come but on after set theory had become well established. Austrian-British philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, Dutch mathematician Lidenbrouwer, founder of modern topology, and English mathematician Raven Goodstein were among those who challenged the new status quo. The crux of this rival philosophy, known as finitism, is that the infinite is a fantasy conjured up by the human mind, an invalid concept in practice, and that only finite mathematical objects truly exist. finite does not dispute the reality of natural numbers and may be happy to accept that such numbers don't just suddenly hit a broad block somewhere. They generally agree that the idea of the number line being unbounded is a reasonable idea and one that's essential, for instance, in the definition of a limit. If we take an example for the graph of y equal 1 over x, as x gets bigger and bigger, y it gets smaller and smaller, and the curve approaches the axis ever more closely. Conventionally, we say that the limit of y as x tends to infinity is 0. Affinities might not take issue with such a statement, but would contend that introducing infinity in this way in just a shorthand of formalism, and that the only mathematical reality involved is finite numbers. In terms of set theory, finitism rejects the idea of the set of all natural numbers. Philosophers and historians of mathematics, Meritas has drawn a distinction between what she calls classical finites, who in the Aristotelian mode are happy to go along with the notion of potentially infinite objects, and strict finitist, finitist. Some in the early some, some in the latter camp would, for instance, have a problem with the statement if every natural number has a successor, and the extent to which it's meaningful to talk about a finite series being the limit of a partial finite sum. Taking finitism a step further leads to the stance known as ultrafinitism, which challenges even the suggestion that finite numbers can be indefinitely large. At the heart of ultrafinitism is the belief of the physical universe is all that exists, and that there's no Platonic place detached from the natural world inhabited by purely mathematical entities. An ultrafinitist may refuse to accept the existence of a number if there isn't, or never will be, enough space, time, matter, energy, or computational capacity to accommodate it. According to this philosophy, there's literally no room for many of the monstrous large integers we've encountered on our journey so far. Conventionally, a number such as a hexagon, expressed here in terms of operos, is assumed to exist even though it would be impossible physically to write it out in full. An ultrafinist would deny this assumption and point to the fact that the number could never be reached in practice by starting from zero and applying the successor function times. There's not enough space, matter, or time in the natural world to allow it to happen. Ultrafinitism then is a research-based philosophy of maths, while finitism is a general echoes Aristotle's view that while potential infinity is acceptable, actual infinity is not. The young British mathematician Lawrence Holm, who competed for the UK in the 2015 and 2016 International Mathematical Olympiads, has provided a somewhat tongue-in-cheek argument to define what might be the largest number that could possibly be instantiated in the physical universe. Holm, when not studying mainstream maths at the University of Cambridge, is a gogolist operating under the subject Dr. Cesium 6 had come up with something he calls the iota function, IMN. The two variables of this function are the input and the time. Bloom defines n, in his very physics-oriented and anthropocentric function, to be the number of Planck times that have elapsed since the crossover from 1 BCE to 1 CE, there being no year zero, a Planck, a Planck time. Remember, is the smallest meaningful unit of the time in nature, equal to about 1 to the minus 44 seconds. Holmes' iota function stakes its claim to be able to produce the larger possible number by combining every function that has ever been defined from 1 CE onwards up to some specified point measured in Planck times, the ultimate salad number if you will. This may seem like a receipt recipe for attackers since functions come in all different forms. However, Holm was laid down for the Holm has laid down four criteria, and any one of which must be met before a function is eligible to be incorporated within the iota function. These criteria specify what to do with functions depending on how they are initially set up to render them into a form that lets them be included. If a function doesn't fit any of the criteria at the time of which I corresponds, it can still be a factor in providing it's accessible in some type of physical storage, such as computer memory, a human brain, or writing. Holmes function is a broad judge that even welcomes in all iotas from previous times. In other words, the set of functions comprising iota at time n, Imn contains all duplicate functions are allowed to. The value of reflects the combined action of all the functions at time n in Planck's units since the start of year 1 CE, with n chosen to produce the highest possible output. Not all functions that are eligible have to be used if they fail to contribute up to a maximum value. Holmes function at the present moment, the moment you're creating this, has a maximum value, even though we have no way of finding out what it is. The function is uncomputable, so that it can never actually be calculated. Nevertheless, it does have a definite value, and there's no ambiguity about what this is. So now we're up to date, as it were, but we still have to take into account future iotas because this is where Holmes number, the ultimate number in the universe according to Holmes comes from. Future iota too will have actual values, though they won't be determined until we reach the corresponding future times. This because each future iota includes not only functions presently known but also functions that will occur between now and then, including all new iotas that spring into existence at every Planck time step. Holmes function ensures that it will always be able to output the absolute upper limit of numbers that humanity can create by absorbing any function or operating that surpasses it within the very next 10 to minus 44 of a second. Even if a similar rival to the iota function arises, the best it can do is maintain supervision for one playing time before the iota function subsumes it in the next cycle. Holmes-Dunberg, in the grand combination of the action of the iota function evaluated over the entire possible history of human activity between 1 CE and a far future in which all the matter in the universe has collapsed into black holes around 1.18 times 10 to 44 1.14 times 10 to 54 years after the Big Bang. One suspects that the human race may not stick around that long. It sometimes had to predict 12 months ahead, let alone a million trillion years. Nevertheless, Holmes number is defined in this way, as the output of the iota function applied to the number 200 at a time of about 1.18 times 10 to 46 54 years after the moment in which our universe came into existence, or whatever stabilization point is reached prior to that. That reason is undetermined, as it uses functions that haven't even been defined yet, but in the fullness of time it will take on a value that will never be exceeded. Of course, it's a little parochial to suppose that humans are the only ones who'll invent new, more powerful functions in the future. Undoubtedly, if we survive, we'll build computers whose intelligence and mathematical prowess will far exceed our own. Then again, they may civilizations on other worlds, which make our ability to generate large numbers look like child's play. But it's easy to generalize Holmes function so that it absorbs new functions wherever and however they're devised.
Lawrence Holm didn't intend for his iota function to be rigorously defined or to be taken too seriously. It's just an interesting thought experiment. In contrast, some recent research within professional mathematics sets up the possibility of a real breakthrough in understanding the finite defined. Mathematician Kita Yokohama in the Japan Advanced Institute of Science and Technology and Computer Science, Ludovic Pate at Paris Diderot University have managed to set like a theory with infinite number and infinity. Their work also builds upon the relationship between mathematics and physical reality. Broadly speaking, there are two kinds of statements you can make in mathematics: finistic ones and infinistic ones. As the names imply, finistic, finitistic statements can be proved without any recourse to the concept of infinity, whereas those that are infinitistic rest of the assumption that infinitely large objects exist. A central aspect of mathematical logic is to explore this division, which is why Yokohama and Pette's work is significant. In 2016, the two young researchers came up with a proof to do with a statement called Ramsey's theorem for pairs that finitistic in nature even though it applies to an infinite set of objects. The result would have pleased David Hilbert, who in 1921 tasked mathematicians with the goal of proving that all of mathematics could be grounded in a limited set of axioms which could be proved to be consistent or free from contradictions. An essential part of his program was to supply finitistic proofs and justifications for all statements to do with infinity. Only by reducing everything to arguments involving finite maths, Hilbert believed, could the skepticism that swirled around Cantor's set theory and transfinite numbers be dispersed. A century ago, there was still dissatisfaction among mathematicians stemming from the fact that presuming the existence of actual infinity did nothing to help with calculations. If abstract methods and concepts had no practical value, and if they could not be used as a part of computation, then critics argued what was their reason for being. Even more of a threat to the new Cantorian regime was that it implies some outrageously non-intuitive ideas, such as the transfinite numbers come in an infinite hierarchy, apparently unconnected to physical reality, and a curious result announced in 1924 by Polish mathematicians Stefan Banach and Alfred Tarski. According to the Banach-Tarski paradox, you could take a ball composed According to the Banach-Tarski paradox, you could take a ball composed of infinitely many pieces and reassemble those pieces to make two balls, or three or more, that are exactly the same size as the original. Of course, you could not do this mathematical trick with actual ball because matter in real universe is made of atoms which aren't infinitely divisible. But in some ways, that strengthened the argument of critics. If the assumptions upon which a theory was based were wholly unrealistic, how could the theory be vindicated? Concerns that the mathematics of the infinite were too abstract to be taken seriously, or worse, that they led to actual contradictions, spurred Hilbert to propose his program. No one shall expel from the paradise which Cantor has created for us, Hilbert declared in 1925 lecture. A sure way to avoid the fiction he believed was to put the theory of infinite sets on a firm logical footing by showing that it was reducible to infinitistic proofs upon which everyone could agree. In 1931, however, Hilbert's hopes were dashed. Australian logician Kurt Gödel stunned the mathematical world by demonstrating beyond doubt that no system of axioms can ever prove its own consistency. An immediate outcome of Gödel's incompleteness theorems is that the axioms of any system of finite mathematics can't even prove their own consistency, never mind the consistency of the theories about the infinite. Over time, this problem of the logical divide between finitistic and infinitistic maths has niggled away and in some ways grown more again. Based on the assumption that infinite set exists, mathematicians have proved theorems about natural numbers that might be of relevance in physics and computer science. Most famously in 1994, English mathematician Andrew Wiles drew on infinitistic logic in his proof of a statement that had confounded number theories for more than 3 centuries, Fermat's last theorem. The need to build bridges between the finite and infinite hasn't gone away just because of the discovery that Hilbert's program can never be completed. If his program can be even partially released, then there may be many statements to do with infinite numbers of objects that it may be possible to connect via finitistic reasoning to the physical world around us. These were the research carried out by Yokohama and Petty on research based on Ramsey theory is relevant. Ramsey theory in general studies the conditions under which order must inevitably be present even in the most chaotic of systems. The various theorems that have sprung up under this large umbrella based on the principle that within large, complex numbers, however disorderly that may appear at the first sight, there exist subsystems that have a definite structure. The implication is that there's no such thing as true randomness. We've already looked at the application of Ramsey theory in connection with Graham's number. The one at the heart of Yokohama and Petty's research is Ramsey theorem for pairs or rt squared 2. One way to understand rt squared 2 is to imagine the set of unnatural numbers, or at least a small part of it. Picture the positive whole numbers as being like little bubbles floating in infinite space. Each number is paired with every other by a finite wall of connecting lines as in figure 13.1. Then imagine the line that joins any given pair of numbers as being colored either blue or red according to some rule. For example, the rule might be for any pair of numbers AB where A less than B, color the pair blue if B less than 2 to the A, otherwise color it red. When all the coloring is complete, rt squared 2 says that there will be an infinitely large subset of number of pairs for which the connecting lines are the same color. The result will hold true whatever is the rule chosen to determine the way the color is carried out. The breakthrough that Yokohama and Petty made was to show that the proof of rt squared can be rendered in terms of the logic of finite numbers. Over the past few decades, logicians have found that the proofs of dozens of different theorems in mathematics can be reduced to just 5 major systems or levels of logic. Levels 1 and 2, the least powerful, are finitistic, whereas the rest are infinitistic. In 1972, it was shown that Ramsey's theorem for triplets of 83 Acticube 2 uses a proof from level 3 of this hierarchy, which depends on infinitistic methods. Acticube 2 involves coloring the links between trios of natural numbers or other objects is an infinite set, either one color or another, according to a predetermined rule. It turns out that the infinitely large single-colored subset or triple that Acticube 2 dictates is bound to exist after this has been done is too complex to be handled by reasoning based on finite sets. But what about its sister theorem at the square 2? Some light on the status of was set in 1995 by British logician Saptensy Tapun and American mathematician Theodore Sloman. They were able to show that Active square 2 falls below Acticube 2 in the logic hierarchy because of the less intricate method of coloring involved. Further work published in 2012, however, proved that neither did Acticube 2 belong to the logic system immediately below the second level of the hierarchy, which is infinitistic. The big question remains, where exactly did Acticube 2 fit in the logic scheme of things? Yokohama and Petty provided the answer using a combination of methods. They were able to show that the logical strength of Acticube 2 is equal to that of the arithmetic of primitive recursive functions, the types of functions that, as we saw in chapter 7, we met most commonly in maths. Crucially, this arithmetic is finitistically reducible. It is a fascinating important result because it shows there are theorems that effectively span the infinite divide in logical strength. Acticube 2 falls somewhere between levels 2 finitistic and 3 infinitistic in the hierarchy of main logic systems. Yet, although it's a statement about an infinitely large collection of things, it can be proved using logic that doesn't involve infinitely. In fact, Ramsey theorem for pairs is reckoned to be the most complicated statement involving infinitely that is known to be finitistically reducible. Mathematicians may not be able to use the same approach, deploying the infinite apparatus of the Acticube 2 to establish further proofs in infinitistic maths, and thereby build more bridges between the finite and infinite. Such developments would mark at least a partial realization of Hilbert's program. What's more, for those reluctant to acknowledge the reality of infinity in maths, there's also some comfort in Yokohama and Petty's discovery. Acticube 2 and its colorable finite sets may not translate directly to anything in the real world. However, the fact that this logical basis is on the same level as the maths that underpins most of science shows mathematical infinity can be allowed without necessarily requiring infinitistic logic and proofs. The debate about whether infinitistic reducibility strengthens the case for actual infinity rumbles on. It's probably true to say that most mathematicians are happy to go along with the utility of infinite sets and not get involved with deep philosophical discussions about whether or not infinity really exists in the mathematics or the physical world. For our purposes, let us accept the standard view of transfinite numbers as developed by Cantor. It's time to answer the question with which we started. What's the biggest number in the world?